Ms. Omar.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your testimonies. Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question.
That
was not a question. I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February 8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation. On February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S.-trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
From the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I
yes or no?
No.
I will take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving U.S. interest, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
Whether under your watch, a genocide will take place, and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld, is a fair question, because the American people want to know that anytime we engage a country, that we think about what our actions could be and how we believe our values are being furthered. That is my question. Will you make sure that human rights are not violated and that we uphold international and human rights?
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
I don't think anybody disputes that. The question I had for you is that does the interest of the United States include protecting human rights and include protecting people against genocide?
That is always the position of the United States.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
Darling from the Bronx. Let's bring in Dan Bongino, former Secret Service agent and former NYPD officer, host of the Dan Bongino Show podcast. Dan, she appears to be speaking for a lot of Democrats, even though she calls herself a democratic socialist. Her big ideas are gutting the military and taxing the rich with different priorities. What do you think?
Yeah, Pete, she's also speaking for people who don't read books because almost nothing she said in that clip was factually correct. Ronald Reagan actually raised a couple of taxes. When he raised those taxes, tax revenue went down. When he cut income taxes significantly, tax revenue went up. So what she's talking about raising taxes, she has very little evidence it's going to produce more revenue. Number two, she's confusing the entire military budget, Pete, with the increase. The entire military budget is around $700 billion. They didn't ask for a $700 billion increase. She's running for Congress. You understand this, right? Not only, by the way, the lies go on, or the mistruths, or whatever the focus group tested word is. Then she says, and they didn't even ask for it. General Mattis actually lobbied for the increase. Does she not know that either? Did she just make up this whole thing? I mean, at what point is she going to go on the air and say something that is factually correct? Well, this is now, what, 100 interviews where she's flubbed something big? This is embarrassing now.
Dan, let me just tell you, that's not the only thing she's talking about. I mean, she clearly is pointing out some of the weaknesses of the GOP. She tweeted that the GOP is weak on fighting for working class Americans, weak on crime, weak on equal rights, weak on national security, weak on rejecting racism, weak on moral courage, weak on family values. So, she says, hey, look, this is the problem with the Republican Party. What say you?
Yeah, that's just a genius tweet. Yeah, we're weak on borders. We want a border wall. That'll definitely weaken up the border. Weaken on family values. That's a fascinating new twist. Griff, is she just making this up? I mean, seriously, she may need an intervention after that tweet right here. That is insane. Why would you even write that? She doesn't even understand basic facts, by the way. That when she says the thing about fair share, the top 1% of earners pay 40% of income taxes. Think federal income taxes. Think about that. 1 out of 100 people working their butts off out there is paying 40 cents of every dollar. The top 20% of earners are paying up 70 to 80%. Now, by the way, new rules on talking about the economy since Trump is in office, and I want to thank him for this. One, we're not apologizing for hard work anymore. Number two, we don't owe you a dime more, Captain Federal Government. Not a dime. Every time we give you $1, you waste it. You flushed our Social Security down the toilet. You ruined the education system. You're drowning us in $20 trillion in debt. We're not giving you any more money. You hear what we're talking about? New rules. No mas, no more money for you. Okay, you've ruined it. You've ruined all your credibility. It's not that the government is too big. It's that it's too dumb to spend our money the right way. We'll keep it now. Thank you very much.
Well, Dan, there are a lot of Democrats that think she's the future of their party. They love the message that she's talking about. A lot of young people as well. You hear free education, free health care. Who doesn't want that? The big question, as we all are talking about this morning, is where is that money going to come from? How are you going to pay for it? So Cabot Phillips, who is on our show all the time, and he goes out and he gets just an idea of how people are thinking in this country. He went to college campuses and asked them about these policies.
He went to the Bronx.
He went to her district. Actually, where she is from and where she campaigned. And here's what they said about how we're going to pay for this.
Her platform includes free health care, college tuition, the minimum living wage, housing as a human right. Are those things that you think the government should be providing for people?
Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
100%.
I feel like everyone should have free education and health care.
How are we going to pay for those?
Oh, God. I mean,
us,
I guess.
Yeah. Who, in your mind, should pay for all of the free things?
All of the free things? Well, some of it should come from taxes, but the government should pay for it.
But the government is funded by taxes.
Yeah.
There you have it, Dan.
That last answer was epic because it sums up the entire progressive movement. How are we going to pay for it? By taxes, but then the government can pay for the rest. As if the government has like a money fairy. Like there's a money fairy that sprinkles money all around. Do you understand like the black hole of intellectualism the current progressive movement lives in? They don't understand. It reminds me of a Milton Friedman analogy where he said the great myth of progressivism is that you think your neighbor's paying for it, but your neighbor's saying the same thing. He thinks you're paying for it. They really believe there's a money fairy out there. Listen, I mean this. I applaud Ocasio-Cortez for doing the hard work to win it. I ran for Congress. I lost. I knocked on a lot of doors. Good, nice job. But I'm being serious here. She's running for Congress. She knows very little about what she's talking about. And if she's going to be the future of the party, she owes the voters out there some semblance of reality, and she's not living in it now.
Well, Dan, based on those yachts behind you in that shot, you're clearly one of those 1%ers that's paying for all of it.
That's so true.
Hey, I'm proud. I earned my money, and I'm proud of it.
Dan,
and new
share
rules.
the
I'm not
wealth.
apologizing anymore.
Good man, brother.
Send your money fairy
Good
up
man.
here.
Yeah.
We could use her for a little while.
We'd use a yacht for a little while.
Thanks for
Dan,
being
good
with
to
us,
see
Dan.
you this
Appreciate
morning.
it.